Welcome to Living Fully, a Calgary Counseling Centre podcast. Each episode, we'll bring you insights from our expert counselors and tips and strategies to improve your mental well-being. I'm your host, Katherine Hurtig. Calgary Counseling Centre and Counseling Alberta provide effective counseling for anyone in Alberta with no waitlist and no financial barriers. Find us online at calgarycounseling.com or counselingalberta.com. Even the hardest working parent with the best of intentions makes mistakes sometimes. In this episode, I talk with Denis Sushkin, registered social worker, about the concept of self-compassion and how it can improve the mental health of parents and benefit the relationships with their children. Parenting isn't easy. We want to do our best in raising our kids, but mistakes are inevitable. There's going to be times that we don't get it right. We'll raise our voices or say the wrong thing, miss watching one of their games, or maybe accidentally embarrass them in front of their friends. Today, we're going to talk about the concept of self-compassion. And if we apply it to our lives and parenting style, it can help our relationships with our children and our mental health. I'm here with Denis Sushkin, a registered social worker with Calgary Counseling Centre.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. It's my pleasure.
Denis, let's start by, if you can just introduce yourself and, talk about your background and all that, that'd be great.
I've been working with the center for a number of years, but counseling and therapy is my second career. I used to be a teacher before. So in my head, I always see those two careers, like they overlap, and it's just like one is continuation of the other. I spent seven years teaching languages, younger kids, music, and I also come from a very different background as well. I come from Central Asia, from Kazakhstan. So I have a bit of a fragmented life.
Did you grow up there?
Yeah, I was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore, in the Soviet Union. And then I spent a big portion of my formative years in Kazakhstan.
When was it that you switched careers into counseling?
So I came to Canada in 2013. And I spent some time working in social services, working with adults and families. And then 2017 is when I started my counseling journey.
Awesome. So Denis, what does self-compassion mean? Can you define it for us?
Yeah. Well, compassion towards yourself is not any different than compassion towards other people. So in general, compassion is attitude of kindness and care towards a person who is struggling or having a hard time with something and the desire to help. So sometimes it's compassion towards others. Sometimes it's self-compassion or the same attitude and desire to help, but directed at yourself.
And then how does that self-kindness, the self-compassion, what role does that play in developing a healthy and nurturing parenting style?
Right, totally. I think there are two main roles that it can play in a family. First of all, we as parents, we're the main tools, the main vehicle for parenting. So sometimes self-compassion is like a maintenance for a car. When you have a car, and it means that you need to fill up the gas, you need to clean, you need to take it to a mechanic from time to time. So sometimes self-compassion is just like a way to care for yourself, be able to be the best version of the parent that you want to be. And the other role that it might play is modeling, because kids have an incredible ability to observe and learn, and quite often learn indirectly. So when we are self-compassionate towards ourselves, that's how we can teach our kids how to be compassionate towards others and how they can be compassionate and kind towards themselves too.
For sure. I have a stepson, and so I definitely think about some of these things, and I think it's really important to model. I mean, not just how to treat other people, but also how to treat yourself. So when your kids see that, they make sure they're taken care of, they make sure they're doing things that they enjoy, they make sure that their needs are met. I mean, at least I feel that shows them that respecting yourself and taking care of yourself is really important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's there are always two different kinds of it. And I think that's the teaching background. The teacher in me is sometimes you can just teach and explain that's what you need to do. That's how you do it. And sometimes you just do something and kids pick up.
Oh, definitely.
Start imitating you. They start looking at what's going on. And yeah, it's definitely a big part of any kind of growth and learning.
How can self-compassion kind of impact the relationship you have with your kids and like the overall family dynamics?
So I think a big piece of this is like this kind of self-compassion, idea, like caring, kind attitude towards yourself and others. Like it can reduce shame and increase connection between people. And I think we all can think of a moment when we struggled and like had a difficult time with something, and there was probably like a moment that anyone can bring forward when you had someone there for you that understood you, felt you, and were willing to help you. And usually when you if listeners can bring this forward and just notice like what effect it had on the person. And if I were to guess it, like it's almost like it decreased the tension for yourself. Like you kind of like relaxed, you kind of like you were not feeling so alone. It's also like means that it affected how you interacted with others around you.
Of course.
So it's a big part of and sometimes we can get this kind of attitude and of care and desire to help from others, and sometimes we can provide it to ourselves. And it's not just about taking care of ourselves, but it's also like it helps you to connect. It helps you to be there for others.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a little bit about modeling. How can parents model this idea of self-compassion for their kids and encourage them to develop their own self-compassion?
I think the big tool, like a huge tool that we all have, and is ability to tell stories. We read stories sometimes. So, and it might look like sometimes just doing something, and kids will I think parents will usually tell when kids are watching, and you can just do something and you don't even need to. You can tell a story through just action and doing things. Sometimes it might mean that you actually say those things out loud and say, hey, even when it's it's been a hard day and I know I'm having a hard time. I'm not as focused or attentive to what you have to say to me. And I just need a moment to step back and give me 5 minutes and I'll come back and listen. Or I really want to hear what you have to say about your day or about the game that you just played, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So just saying it out loud helps kids to oh, that's what's happening. Or even another thing is when kids are struggling and when they don't know what's happening around them without a very concrete story, they tend to either self-doubt or self-blame. So this ability to say it out loud, hey, I'm having a hard time, it's been a hard day at work, whatever, it gets this doubt and blame out of the picture for kids. They know, oh, that's what's happening for my parent or my dad or my mom. And it helps them to relax. And sometimes it can be just a matter of reading stories. We read different things like those books. And we could just name or notice those moments when characters in the book are being kind towards others or help others, or just being kind towards themselves, and just highlight them. Hey, that was a neat part of the story.
Yeah, I like that. Can you think of any examples of specific techniques or exercises or practices that parents can use to enhance their self-compassion?
Yeah, definitely. Well, let me maybe talk about 3. 2 might be a bit of a shorter term, something that you can do on a daily basis. And the third one might be a little bit might require some time and attention from people too. But first of all, when I think about self-compassion especially, it's it requires 3 steps to it. You need to name what's happening. It's be it it's been a hard day at work and I'm tired, or I'm not focused, or I'm scattered, whatever it is. You need to be able to, second step is to connect with the dots about just that's the context that I'm in. It makes sense. It's been a very hectic day at work, for example. Yeah. And connect to the context and connect to just a common human experience. Because a big part of it is if even saying something along the lines who wouldn't feel tired after a day like this? So just to normalize and cross-reference and have a bigger picture in view. That's the second step that people can do. And then the last one is to be kind. But when I think about being kind, it doesn't only mean just accepting what's going on, because sometimes, if there's nothing else we can do, being kind sometimes means just accepting and hey, that makes sense. And it's that's okay to feel what I'm feeling. And sometimes being kind means maybe tapping into resources or just doing something, acting on that situation that you're in. So I'm thinking if if we're kind of going back to the example of like having a hard day at work and not being able to connect with your kid, is like, well, right now I need just like 5 minutes or 10 minutes to have a breather. And maybe it means like asking someone to step in. So you can name what's happening, connect to the bigger context and to like just the human experience of being a parent or doing life in general. And then thinking like, what is it that I need right now? Maybe it's just like, hey, I just need to be kinder to myself, or maybe I do need to do something to set a boundary or take some time for myself. So that's the first kind of like technique or strategy people can use: name, connect, and then do something about it. The other one, and I'm stealing this from an author and therapist, Becky Kennedy. She works with families a lot. She talks about this in the context of like working with kids, but like this attitude of like, this is a good kid who's having a hard time with X, Y, and Z, instead of like thinking or thinking or saying kind of like, you're like, what's wrong with you? Or why are you doing what you're doing? So, and applying something similar to yourself, like I'm a good parent still who's having a hard time with X, Y, and Z. I'm a good parent who's having a hard time after a long, exhausting day at work. And that can just a phrase like this can help you to get out of this kind of like shame cycle of like, oh, there's something wrong with me. And it's just like normalizing.
Yeah, I think, like you said, shame is a big part of it.
Yeah, and that's the big part of it. So just this phrase, and kind of, I'm a good parent who's having a hard time, and then just filling the blank. What is it that you're having a hard time with? Also, will give you information on like maybe information about what you might need in any given moment.
I really like that.
Yeah,
I'm a good parent. I'm just having a hard time.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, it can be just like give you a bit of a distance. The third one is like might kind of like take some time for people, but I really like, we usually think like parenting means that you need to give a lot, but actually think like to care for others or even care for oneself is more than just giving. I really like how Esther Perel, she's a prominent relationship expert, she usually talks that there are 7 verbs or actions that actually shape the way we love and care for others, including sometimes ourselves. So the 7 verbs are to take, to give, to ask, to receive, to share, to refuse, and to play. And that's
those all like show up in relationships, you're saying?
Well, they shape the way we love and care for someone, including ourselves. So we need to give to others, and that's a big part of it. And that's what comes first when it comes to parenting.
Yeah, but that's what we think of first, for sure.
Yeah, but it also like means that you need to take that 5 or 10 minutes for yourself. It also means sometimes you need to ask for what kind of help you need.
Yeah.
If you ask for something, that also means that you need to be able to receive it, because it's not always easy. Because it's also means you need to sometimes you need to share, be it resources or just share what's going on for you.
Yeah, like that's another expectation around parenting, is that you can handle it all yourself.
Right. Yeah, and it's not a job for one person or even 2 people in general. Yeah, and the other 2 verbs is to refuse or to play. So I'll name it one more time. So to care for someone, including yourself, you need to take, to give, to ask, to receive, to share, to refuse, and to play. And another technique or strategy that people can use is just to write those verbs down. Think about what comes naturally to you. I would assume that to give will be one of the top ones, but there might be other verbs or actions that come also naturally to you. And also then highlight which one of them are not as easy for you to do. And just take one verb, one action, and just focus on it for a month. If you going back to I'm a good parent who's having a hard time sometimes to say no to people or to refuse.
Yeah.
And it also means that means I can get better, because some of those verbs and actions require some cultivating and focusing on it. So it's not enough just to accept, I'm having a hard time. Sometimes it's also require you to do something about it. And then you can just practice it for a month, let's say. And again, people can even connect it to the bigger context and just involve your kids in this. Hey, that's a month, and when we're focusing on this, and we want to be able as a family to do it well. And it becomes just a practice for yourself or practice for the whole family.
Yeah. I like that idea of having it written out because seeing those, like, that they're all part of taking care of yourself and others, it makes it easier to accept, like, okay, I need to refuse my child this one thing. It's, not a bad parent. It's part of caring for them.
Yeah, it's part of my job description in a sense. Like, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, so this is kind of related. We talked about there is kind of a lot of shame that comes to messing up as a parent, and I see it a lot on social media. Like, I think we're all guilty of this. We put out onto social media the life that we want people to think we have. We just put out the best. So you'll see, your friends and other families that look perfect, that they look like they're doing everything right. So it's hard not to judge ourselves and our choices when that's what we're taking in. Can you provide any examples of how self-compassion can help parents overcome, like, guilt and self-judgment and that shame?
Totally. Yeah, it's such a good question. Such a big question as well. I love the we put out like just the best things on social media, and people do it. But on the flip side, we usually compare our behind the scenes shots to those best shots of other people, and it just
exactly
can be such an overwhelming experience. But also, like, I think the nuance I want to kind of also highlight is that there are a couple of words that we use interchangeably, but they can be like confusing, like guilt, shame, judgment.
Right.
And I want to clarify, because like when I look at those things, I see actually only two processes, like the shame versus guilt.
Okay.
But by shame, I mean, it's like feeling bad about yourself as a person. Like, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad partner, I'm a bad parent, like this kind of state. I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. Guilt, on the other side, is feeling bad about what we did. Shame is never helpful. Guilt is actually can be adaptive, and it can be just we make mistakes. I think that's totally fair. That's totally true. There is no way around it. I think if you're human and you're in relationships with others, like, you will constantly go through the cycle of like harmony, disharmony, repair. And there's no way around it. So
shame's more like all encompassing, and guilt is more like
situational and about something that we did. Because like if there's a mistake that happened, in a way, guilt is a pathway, or like the way to repair. If I'm interacting with my kid and I know I'm not attentive, or as attentive as I want to be, or like sometimes something is not right. So it doesn't mean that I'm bad. It's just like, I'm not doing this the way I need to do it, or I can be. So guilt is actually adaptive.
Right. It's kind of that like clue, like, okay, this is an opportunity to adjust what I'm doing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it it helps me, versus feeling shame. There's something wrong with me. I'm like, I can't be a good parent because I have whatever it is, whatever story with it. It's not helpful. So first of all, separating those two, like thinking like, am I more in the shame cycle, or am I in the guilt? And if guilt is appropriate, then maybe doing something about it is really helpful. I just recently had a conversation with someone, and they shared what a very close person to them said to them, and this is such a great way to kind of talk about not getting stuck in the shame cycle. They said, I made a lot of mistakes in my life that I still feel guilty about, but they do not define me.
Right. Yeah.
That's part of this kind of if you're human, you will make mistakes.
Yeah. It's bound to happen. We're definitely not perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. How do we respond to those situations? What we do, it's that's what helps. And that's where if there's something, and it's more about maybe I can do things better. That may be just an information for me, and I can learn from it.
Yeah.
And do something.
Awesome. Denis, what do you think some potential barriers or challenges might be that parents could have when they're trying to practice self-compassion?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it can be not an easy practice to kind of incorporate.
Yeah, especially if it's new to you.
Totally. Yeah, and I think I'm thinking about a couple of things here. So first of all, some of the social norms. In how we grew up, and what kind of messages we take from people around us, from the culture around us. So usually in any family unit, there is a primary or frontline parent, and in a more typical heterosexual couples, this is usually fall under the woman's domain. And this can be kind of women, or this kind of primary caregivers, they socialize to take care of others, and they we're not taught to take a good care of ourselves. And this can be like a bigger, just like the context that we're coming from. If we're not taught how to, if we didn't have parents who like didn't, like, they, for a lot of different reasons, again, like they're not to blame. Like, they were not thinking. Maybe they were surviving other things that are happening.
Right.
Their minds were like at kind of like just providing, because that was a very different context for them. But maybe kind of we're not taught how to take care of ourselves, and that can be a barrier.
Not taught to take care of ourselves, or just not taught to put ourselves first ever.
Yeah, definitely. And that can be a big part of like what makes it harder, because it's something new. Like it feels awkward. It's like whenever you're learning a new skill, it's like it feels like unnatural and awkward. And like, it's kind of, and it's also like it can be challenging, but also means that we're doing something right and we're doing something new.
Right. And growing, for sure.
Yeah. Another challenge is the isolation of families or couples specifically. Like couples tend to do this kind of work like on their own and not have enough support. And when you have just like a context that you're in is challenging, and there are not that many people that can help, it also makes it sometimes harder. You don't think twice about like taking care of yourself. So parenting is not a job for one person, that's for sure, but it's not a job for just two people either, which kind of like affects.
What's that cliche? Like it takes a village or something?
Yeah. And we do need people around us, but also like I propose that we change this saying, this cliche. I think it's not just takes a village. I think it takes a good village, not perfect, but a good village, because that can be another area or challenge. Is like complex family dynamics can also be a challenge or a barrier.
Definitely.
When it's it definitely helps people like to have people around, but like when the village is not functioning well, it also can like hinder so many different things.
Yes, that will be a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
So this is kind of along the same lines. Like, what about cultural or societal factors that would kind of impact how we approach self-compassion?
Yeah, definitely. When I think about culture, it can be culture like culture of a nation or country. It also can be a culture like of a certain family. When I think about cultures, I tend to think like there are cultures that focus more on self-reliance, like this independence. More stereotypically, people think about North America. And there are also cultures that focus more on interdependence and loyalty. It's more of a communal, like those families or like countries that have more of a communal feel to it. And typically for people who come from a background when their family or their culture in general focus more on loyalty and interdependence, they usually tend to have like harder time with this idea of self-compassion. And I think that's kind of like the second culture like is closer to home for me. I think when people hear from those cultures, when they hear self-compassion, they actually hear something along the lines of like, this is self-indulgent, unnecessary, selfish kindness to yourself.
Right.
Yourself.
Yeah.
Which is like not, what self-compassion means. And sometimes the emphasis is more on the kind of like self-indulgent, something selfish. Sometimes the emphasis is more like this is not necessary. Yeah, another thing that shapes how I understand it, and separating those two, like self-compassion doesn't mean it's something selfish. Self-compassion is a good way to take care of yourself, take care of the relationships. It's about maintenance and actually.
Yeah, because when, like you said, you're the best version of yourself, and you're in the best place you can be, then you're better able to take care of others and be there for and be more loyal and whatever else, Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing selfish about it. But again, like sometimes unintentionally, like we grew up with those messages, and then it's because self-compassion becomes something selfish.
Yeah, whether it's at a family level or, a societal level, it would definitely be difficult to break out of that mindset. Denis, how do you think self-compassion can support parents in, kind of managing and processing, the many difficult emotions that are going to arise during parenting?
I tend to think that any emotion is data. It's nothing more. Like there's nothing, emotion's not good or bad. Our main job is to notice those emotions, name them, understand what's going on, what the reaction is. Sometimes feel like emotions have reasons of their own. If a part of us is feeling something, it's usually a good idea to at least check in and see what's going on. And it can be
what
just
reason is behind that. Yeah.
Yeah. And a check-in like this can be an act of self-compassion. Like a part of me is like feeling really overwhelmed. And it's just kind of like, what's going on? Just connect into the bigger context, kind of like going through the process, the steps of being kind of like just kind and caring towards yourself, or a part of yourself that's feeling whatever you're feeling, can be a big part of like, yeah, again, like us moving forward, doing something about it, be just like doing something for ourselves, or being a better parent.
And I think what you said earlier about like one of those aspects of self-compassion, the just like that common human experience.
Yeah, the common humanity, or the context, like norm reference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. So kind of looking at your situation with that lens. Of course, I'm feeling overwhelmed in this moment, or of course, this situation would make me frustrated. I'm sure like lots of other people would feel the same thing.
Yeah, and that's just it becomes a process, and again, it can become even a teaching moment, for a connection moment with our kids too.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like learning and understanding what to do with those emotions is a big part of like growth and development. All kids are born with this incredible ability to feel everything, but it takes us like 25 years for our brains to fully develop and kind of like learn how to work with those emotions. So us working through those. Yeah.
That's so important as parents, is to help our kids work through those emotions and understand, like you said, there's not like a value associated with them. Like if, kids are scared or sad or whatever, like it's not wrong to feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sometimes just like takes being just kind and understanding. Sometimes it takes just like some kind of like clear and calm attitudes of what's going on, just this ability to think. Sometimes it's also like takes some courage to face our own fears or big emotions, or our kids' big emotions. Because that can be like, whoa, what's just happened? Our main job can, okay, whatever's going on, I'm a good parent, or this is a good kid in front of me. Like they're having a hard time. Even when we think about like our partners, like there's like, we all kind of have those days when we snap, we're more grumpy, or like we do something, and like such a big difference when we kind of like, when we hear what's wrong with you versus like, you might be having a hard time with something. I don't know what's going on, but like what's going on. So just the ability to turn towards somebody else with this kind of like, not with the idea of like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. Not with judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Help me, even if I'm here for you, like help me understand something. Like it's not okay how you talk to me right now, but like I'm here for you. Like if you're having a hard time with something, like let me know, and that let's see what we can do about it.
Yeah. If this concept is new to a parent, what advice would you give to them to kind of start incorporating that into their parenting?
Yeah. Well, I think 2 steps that people can like take. First of all, like just thinking about like what's the context that you're coming from, be it like cultural context. Like did you grow up with more messages of like self-reliance and kind of like how to take care of yourself? Did you grow up more with the kind of like those that you need to take care of others? So knowing where you come from can be helpful, because it gives you the context. It helps you to connect with the bigger picture. And the other thing is just like using this phrase more often, like this idea of like having a hard time with something as opposed to something wrong with me or with somebody else.
Yeah.
Saying it to others more often, like, hey, like I see you, like you're like, I still see you as a good person, as a good child. You're having a hard time with something, like either help me understand what's going on, or just like checking in with yourself even. So using this phrase more often, like I'm still a good parent who's having a hard time with refusing, saying no, managing boundaries, managing whatever it is. So kind of it can be a good starting point.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Denis. I think this is, it's an important topic, and it's, it can be hard for parents to have that self-compassion. So I think you've given our listeners a lot of good tips. Thank you so much.
Sure. No, you're welcome. It's been pleasure and fun.
You've been listening to Living Fully, a Calgary Counseling Center podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This episode was produced by Nick here, Louisa Campos, and by me, Katherine Hurtig. A special thanks to Denis Sushkin. To stay up to date on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. We're available in your favorite podcast app. Living Fully is a production of Calgary Counseling Center and recorded in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Living Fully podcast is not a substitute or alternative for professional care or treatment. If you're in Alberta and need help, please go to calgarycounseling.com or counselingalberta.com. For help across Canada and the United States, call 211. If you are outside of Canada and the US, seek help from your general medical practitioner.